All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to begin our next unit, which is going to be over modifiers. Modifiers are essentially words that, you know, change other words in some way, and that's what modifier means. It means to change. So a lot of times when you took English courses in the past, you when you speak of adjectives, you speak of them as descriptors, which some of them are, a lot of them are, but not all of them. So we refer to both adjectives and adverbs from now on as words that modify. So an adjective is a modifier. It changes a word. It doesn't necessarily have to describe it, and we will talk about that a little bit more as we move on. So this particular video is mostly about just doing adjective types, not so much adjective qualities. So we'll get into adjective qualities uh, with our next video, but for right now, we're just going to talk about adjective types, specifically what adjectives do, where they are located in a sentence, and what types of adjectives there are. Okay, so this next stuff is going to be pretty important just because we're going to be focusing a lot on modifiers coming up. Obviously, your next test is going to be over modifiers, but we're also going to be talking about modifiers not just as single words, but as groups of words. So that's something that we don't necessarily need to think about now, but you're going to need a very strong foundation uh, in these sort of adjective definitions. So this is going to be something that's going to be coming up an awful lot, not just this year, but for all the rest of the years. So let's start with the definition. Generally speaking, um, if I asked you to provide a definition for what an adjective is, I would hear a lot of things like um, that they are descriptive words, they are words that describe, which is only half correct. Once again, as I said in the beginning of the video, adjectives are words that modify. To modify means very simply to change. So adjectives are modifiers. They change a word. They don't necessarily describe a word. And adjectives modify nouns and pronouns. So a lot of times we don't think about adjectives as modifying pronouns, but because pronouns are, in terms of qualities exactly like nouns, adjectives also modify pronouns. So adjectives modify nouns and pronouns. So if I ask for a definition of an adjective from now on, basically that's the verbiage that I would want you to use. They are modifiers, so they modify nouns and pronouns. Adjective locations. I always kind of make the joke that adjectives are, you know, if you were picking, a significant other, you wouldn't want to pick an adjective because adjectives tend to be clingy. What does that mean that they're clingy? Well, basically, it means that they tend to be as close to what they modify as they can be. So usually that means either right in front or right in behind. Now, there are some times that adjectives can be used as subject complements. For instance, so if we remember subject complements, we remember that they come after linking verbs and they refer back to the subject. So if I take a look at the first example, the scary dog is in the house. The what's obviously the most obvious adjective in the sentence. Correct. So scary. The scary dog. What kind of dog is it? It's a scary dog. It's modifying dog. It's changing dog. Dog by itself is different than the scary dog. So change is the word. Um, Adjectives can also be subject complements. We've talked about predicate nominatives in the past. Well, you can also have predicate adjectives. So predicate adjective is merely just an adjective that is used as a subject complement. Remember, a subject complement is a word in the predicate that refers back to the subject and comes after a linking verb. So if we take a look at this second sentence, the dog is scary. What would the subject complement be in this sentence? Correct. It would be scary again, and it's referring to dog. It's still modifying dog, but it's acting as a subject complement. So that's really the only time when the location is going to be a little different than it being right in front, the adjective being right in front or right behind the word that it is modifying. Let's take a look at adjective questions. Your book has probably more of these than you need. There are really two questions that adjectives answer depending on their types. So adjectives can answer the question, what kind, or they can answer the question, which one. Sometimes, very rarely, they can answer questions like how many, but generally speaking, if you have an adjective, it is answering one of two of those questions, what kind and which one. And if we look up at our examples in the up here, what kind of dog do I have? I have a scary dog. Well, and if we look at this one over here, which dog is it? It's the dog, which kind of gives us down to our adjective types. There are two types of adjectives in general. There are descriptive adjectives and there are limiting adjectives, which is why you can't say adjectives just describe, because some of them limit. And the limiting adjectives are the ones that you're going to want to focus on in terms of types of adjectives. So descriptive adjectives are mostly just the adjectives that you're used to. These are the adjectives that answer the question, what kind, and they are the descriptive words that you're used to. Like you're scary, big, mean, fat, skinny. The descriptive adjectives are the ones that you're kind of used to. It's the limiting adjectives that you're going to have to study because they might not be, something that you might consider to be adjectives. Before we get off the topic of descriptive adjectives, in general, I want you to write down the definition of a proper adjective, which is a type of descriptive adjective that is made from a proper noun. So if I said something along the lines of, I will, put up the American flag at the beginning of the day. There's a proper adjective in the sentence. If you could please find it, that would be great. And of course, the answer is American. So obviously, the issue with proper adjectives is because they are proper and they often refer to countries. You don't think of them as adjectives, you think of them as nouns. So we need to start thinking about, whether or not words are modifying or acting as nouns. So in this particular instance, it's very clearly telling us what kind of flag that it is. All right, so let's get down to limiting adjectives. The limiting adjectives, they do not describe, but they limit the noun or pronoun. It points out an object, and sometimes it'll indicate number. And here are the limiting adjective types. There are articles, a, and the. I don't think I'm going to spend too much time on having you identify the articles, but you should know that they are adjectives and they are limiting adjectives. So if I said, the cat, you should be able to point out the fact that the is telling me which cat that I have. And then I have the pronomial adjectives. So pronomials are words that can be used as either adjectives or pronouns. So a lot of these words down here are going to seem familiar to you, and they're going to seem familiar to you because they can be used as pronouns, at least some of them. So something to look out for as well. You have demonstrative adjectives, which you also have demonstrative pronouns, this, that, these, and those. Possessive adjectives, which some of them are different than the possessive pronouns, but some of them are the same, like his and its, I believe. And then you have interrogative adjectives. So those are just words that you're going to have to know that are adjectives. So I'm going to ask you questions like find the adjectives in the sentence. And that's not going to be just descriptive adjectives. That's also going to be limiting adjectives as well. All right, so that's the video this time. Probably obviously, we have quality of adjectives that we still need to go over, but for now, I would say it's probably the most difficult thing is being able to identify these limiting adjectives and being able to identify these predicate adjectives. So if I was going to study something more in depth, I would imagine that those would be the two things that I would study most.